Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. Today I'll be showing you how I built this web page from nothing. It will calculate the optimal Bitcoin allocation. Let's get started. So beginning the project, we're going to want to have an index.html file, a main.js file, a styles.css, a pop-up styles.css, and a result styles.css. So we're going to want to begin by creating the HTML header. And here we're going to have a title, and then we're going to link each one of our style sheets and the JavaScript file. So after building out the header, we're going to want to start with the body. So within the body, we're going to have a few different divs. Firstly, we'll have one called left side. And then following that one will be right side. As our third div, we will have picture. And after that, we're going to have the divs that contain more of the information. The first one being BTC model. And we will also be giving this one an ID because we will be referencing it in the CSS. After that one, we will have pop-up. And again, we will want to give this one an ID. Lastly, we are going to have one called results. And that one will be given an ID as well. So within the body, we're going to want to start in BTC model. Here, we're going to create a new div. The first object will be a button. Type equals to button. ID also equal to button. And we're going to give it an onClick equal to start questions. After that, give it some text, say click to start, and we're going to close out that button. Additionally, we're going to create a function called start questions just to avoid any possible errors. So we have that created, save and save, and we're going to see when we open the website a big click to start button in the top left corner. So we will continue with BTC modal. We're going to add a header, calculate optimal Bitcoin allocation. After the header, we're going to want to create a new class or a new div with the class name flex. Within this class, we're going to want to have an input for the user to say how much money they have in their portfolio. So we're going to create a span called currency with ID equal to currency as well, and a style equal to display, and we're going to want this to be hidden initially, so we're going to put none. And this will just be a $sign. After that, we're going to want the actual input. So input type equals to hidden as well, ID equal to input, name equal to BTC input, and once again, display equals to none. We are also going to want to put in a placeholder, and we're going to say 1000 just to give them a value, and that will be the end of the input, and we will also close out the div. So following the changes, let's see what the output looks like. Here you can see the header with the button, but the input is still missing. So let's create the JavaScript function start questions, which will display the input so we can start asking our user questions. So the first line that we're going to include is changing the input to type text. And then we will also want to change the currency style to block. After that, we're going to want to change our buttons text because we will no longer be starting. Instead, we'll be asking our next question. And then we will also want to change the header. And finally, we will make it so the button will go on to the second question after the first question has been asked. So we will go ahead and create that function. So let's see what this looks like. So after clicking the button, you can now see that we have a new question: how large is your portfolio? The $ currency, the input, and the next button. So the next thing that we will add is the picture. Here we can simply say image source equals Bitcoin pic. Make sure to save it in your files. And let's open that up. And we can see that the picture takes up most of the screen, but we still have the button. So we're going to want to resize this using CSS. So to resize our photo, let's use styles.css. Let's go .picture, text align, center, and then .picture img. Let's go with height or width 10%, height 10%, and a margin of 2%. And as you can see, the photo is now centered and properly sized. So now let's spruce up the background of the web page. Let's add a body. And here we're going to set the background to black, color to gold, and let's set a font family, and just make sure you get this exactly correct. And as you can see now, we have yellow words and a black background that fits the Bitcoin picture much better. After the body formatting, let's now jump into BTC model formatting. So I'm going to open up BTC model, and we're going to set the width at 100%, position absolute, top at 50%, transform translate Y at -50%, and once again text align center. So let's see how this results. And as you can see, everything is centered in the middle of the page, and when you click to start, this is what our input and button look like. So next what we're going to want to do is kind of make this button look a little bit cooler. So let's go BTC model button, and let's start editing this. So width, let's go with 160 pixels, and let's give it some padding, 10 pixels and 0. Text align again in the center. Let's give it a margin of 20 pixels and 10 pixels. And let's give it a border radius of 25 pixels. This will give it rounded edges. Let's go with a font weight bold, a border 4 pixels, solid gold, and a background color white. Finally, a font size of 18 pixels. So let's see what this looks like. Now our button looks a lot cooler. So obviously we do not want the $ to be above the input like this. So if you recall, our $ and input are within the flex div. So we're going to want to start building that out in CSS. So .flex, let's go with display flex, justify content center, align items center, and a margin of 20 pixels, 10 pixels. So after these updates, we can see that now the $ is in front of the input. However, it still looks pretty ugly. So let's change that. So now we're going to want to edit that $. So we're going to need to go .flex, .currency, and we're going to want to edit the font size to be 25 pixels, padding to be 0, 10 pixels, 0, 10 pixels, color, black. We're going to want to give it a border, 2 pixels, solid, and then dash CCC as the color. We're also going to want to set the border dot right to 0. Border radius will be 7 pixels, 0, 0, 7 pixels. And the background color will be white. So what will all these changes do? Now you can see that the $sign is looking more like the input, but now we need to change the input. So let's get the input to match the currency. So if we go .flex, input, we change the max width to be 150 pixels. Flex, just make it 300 pixels. Font size to be 25 pixels. Border, same thing as up here. And border radius will be the opposite actually. So 0, 7, 7, 0. And we will also want to make the border left dot style equal to none. So after these changes, there's still a little mismatch. So what we need to do is create star and set margin to 0 and padding to 0. After this change, we now have an input with a currency sign to make it easy and looking good. So as you can see, the first question asks, how large is your portfolio? So we're going to want a place to store that. So up here, let's go variable, portfolio value equals 0. So when we start our second question, let's start with creating input equals document.querySelector. Select it by input. Next, let's set that portfolio value equal to input.value. After that, we're going to want to do the same thing, document.querySelector. This time choose H1. And we're going to want to edit the text to be our second question, which is what is the current price of Bitcoin? After that, we're going to want to set the input value back to empty. And we're going to want to change the placeholder to make more sense for the price of Bitcoin, which is somewhere around 19,500 right now. And lastly, we're going to want to change the button. So we're going to go get element.id, button, dot on click. We're going to want to change this to third question. And under there, I'm going to make a function, third question, to avoid errors. All right, so let's save that. Refresh the page here. So let's say we entered, and now we can see that it goes on to a second question. So before we go into the third question, let's think about what type of things we need to have in the input. We need to have numbers that are not blank. We need to have numbers that are numbers and not words. And we need it to be greater than 0. So to check for this, let's create a function, number error check. And let's pass through the element, which is the input. So firstly, we can check if element.value.length is equal to 0. So if it's blank, we're going to pass in an alert and a message just saying, please enter number values. And we're just going to return false. Else if is nan element dot value. So this makes sure that it is a number value. If this is true, then what we're going to want to say is must input numbers. And same thing here. And I forgot the semicolon here. we're going to say return false. And you'll see why we're using Boolean logic in a second. The third else if will be element.value less than 0, because 0 is okay, but less than 0 we cannot have. So we will also pass in an alert there and say value must be greater than 0. And again, return false. So if none of these things are true, of course, we're going to say else return true. So where can we utilize this? Let's go back up to the first and second question. So actually within the second question. So after we collect the input from the first question, we can check it. So let's check it right after we have it. So let's say if it is not, so if it's false, then, and we pass in the input, then we can return, and that will just essentially end that function. So let's test this out. Let's try to write Joe, and we get an alert, must input numbers. Let's say I put negative 100, value must be greater than 0, and let's say it's blank, please enter numbers. So now jumping into the third question, we're going to want to use the exact same first two lines, and then we're going to want a place to store our value. So let's create Bitcoin price equals 0 up at the top, and then we're going to set Bitcoin price equal to parse int of input dot value. So that way when we do our calculations later, it comes in as a number. So next we're going to want to do document.query selector for H1. And again, we're going to want to change the text content to how many price scenarios would you like to test? So that will be our next question. And since we're doing price scenarios, we're not going to have currents anymore. So let's actually get rid of the dollar sign. So document.getElement by ID, currency, style, display, and set that equal to none, and that will no longer show. Next thing we're going to want to do is set that input value just like we did last time, make it empty again. We're going to want to make it look fine now that the currency sign is not there. So we're going to want to make the border left equal to 2 pixels solid hashtag CCC. We're going to want to make the border radius equal to 7 pixels 4 times over. I messed that up. Oh no. I made that as hard as possible. And then we're going to want to make a placeholder that makes more sense for scenario number. So let's make placeholder equal to 2 and input.style.text align. We're going to want to center now that we don't have the currency, and input.style.max width. We will now want to make a little bit smaller since we don't have as many characters. And finally, document.getElement by ID button on click will equal to open pop-up. And so we are going to want to create that function, open pop-up down there. There we go. Let me save that. And so we can see now we ask for how many scenarios the user will want to test. So now that we're finished asking the user the initial questions, we now want to hop into the pop-up. And within the pop-up, we're going to start off with a header, ID equals to pop h1. And within there, we're going to add some text to be scenario 1. And then we will have a second header, and this one will just say scenario price. And so we're going to be collecting the price from the user. So we're going to need a div class equals flex in, close that. And we're going to include a span class equals currency, ID equals currency as well. And within here, we are just going to have a $sign like we did earlier. After that, we're going to have an input, ID equals S price, price input, and we are going to close that one out. So after we have the currency and the input for the scenario price, we now want to close out that div, and we're going to make a third header, and we're going to add scenario probability. So after the text asking for the scenario probability, we're going to have a new class called flexProb. And within that, we're going to again need a input. ID this time is going to be sprob input. After the input, we are going to do another currency. So I can just copy and paste the code here. However, this time we are going to use a percentage sign instead. So there's one more thing we need. We need a button to move on to the next scenario or to see the results. So we're going to say button type equals button, ID equals S button for scenario button, and we're going to add an on click equal to scenario loop. And the text within the button will just say next. And we can close out that button. All right. So let's save that and see the results. So the output from all the pop-up class additions will show everything that we added up here. What we need to do is remove everything here in the middle and put all this information in the middle. So now that we have this screen, let's make it so we can only see the pop-up and edit that. So we're going to temporarily make this visibility hidden for BTC modal, and let's start editing the pop-up. So we're going to want color to be black. We're going to want the width to be 500 pixels, height to be 400 pixels. We're going to want the background color to be gray. We're going to want a border, and let's make it a 4-pixel border, solid white. We're going to want a border radius of 20 pixels. We're going to need to text align center, and we're going to make visibility hidden once we restart, but let's go with position absolute for now. Top 27%, and margin left to auto, and margin right to auto as well. Left set to 0. By the way, these styles will make the div center in the page. Okay, so we have everything we need there. Let's see what the page looks like now. So you can see we have a scenario pop-up for the user to input the different scenarios. So obviously you don't want everything to be scrunched together. So let's edit the pop-up, and for now let's do H1, H2, and H3. So we're going to want to give it a padding, 20 pixels, a font size of 25 pixels, and padding on the bottom of 10 pixels. So after those changes, everything is a little spaced out, but still looks kind of weird. Let's start by editing the flex in. So we're going to want to display flex this, justify content center, and align items center. Make the margin on the bottom 20 pixels as well. So this should change the inputs a little bit. And now let's do some more flex in and change the input within the flex in div. So we want the font size here to be respecified to 20 pixels. Make the max width 100 pixels. Flex 300 pixels. Font size we've already set. So let's go with border, 2 pixels, solid, CCC. And border radius, let's go 0, 7, 7, 0. And border left style, let's go with none. And outline of 0. All right. So there we go. There's the scenario price. Input changed like our input is at the beginning. We also need to fix the $sign. So we'll go flex in dot currency, font size 20 pixels, padding, it'll be 0, 10 pixels, 0, 10 pixels. Color will also be black. Border will be the same. So quick copy and paste. Border right will be 0. And the border radius will be 7 pixels, 0, 7 pixels, and 0. Oh, I'm sorry, 0, 0, 7 pixels. And the background color will be white. Save. And as you can see, the input for the $sign looks good. So now we're going to want to fix the probability input. So .flex prob input, and we're actually going to use the same font size as the flex in currency. And we're going to set max width to 50 pixels. And then we are going to use the same flex and border as the flex in input. And then we're going to use the same border radius as the currency. Finally, we're going to set border right style equal to none and an outline of 0. And text align, we're going to go right since the percent sign is on the right. So we can see the changes made there. And then we're going to want to do .flexprob .currency. And we're going to do the font size to be the same, so 20. But we're going to do some padding, which will be 0, 10, 0, 10. Color will be black as well. And we're going to have the same border as used earlier. But we're going to set border left, in this case, to 0. And then we're going to set the border radius to 0, 7, 0, or sorry, 7 and 0. And background color will be white. So there's still a little space in between the two, which we will fix. So to fix this little space, if you recall what we did for flexing up here, we're just going to go comma and then flex prob and add the probability to that. And sure enough, it fixed the space. So next we're going to want to edit the button. So we can go .popup button. And within here, we're going to set a few things. So margin top is going to be 20 pixels, give it a little space. Width will be 100 pixels. Padding, 15.0. Text align center. Border radius of 20 pixels. And a font weight bold. And finally, border of 2 pixels, solid and black. So let's save this. So similarly, we want to make it so it changes color when we hover. So we can go .popup button hover. And within here, we're going to set the background color to gray. We're going to make a transition of 0.7 seconds and cursor to pointer. So let's save that. And now you can see that it changes color. So now that we have the pop-up design, we're going to want to go back to the beginning. So to do this, we're going to go to pop-up styles, and we're going to set the visibility to hidden. Let's go to normal styles, BTC model. We're going to make the visibility back, and then go to the HTML, and again, make visibility back to normal. So now we are back to the beginning. So now we're going to want to work on the function open popup. So the first thing we're going to want to do is make a variable scenarios equals 0, and that's the number of scenarios the user is going to test. We're going to make scenarios equal to parse int document dot query selector input dot value. For the next line, we're going to want to say document dot get element by ID BTC model dot style dot visibility is equal to hidden. That will hide the initial stuff. And then we're going to want to say document dot get element by ID again. This time popup dot style dot visibility is equal to visible. All right. So after that, let's see what happens when we run the open popup function. So after this, we now get a pop-up to allow the user to enter the scenario data. So now we want to work on the scenario loop. So we're going to want to add a couple different variables. The first one is scenario count, and we're going to set that equal to 0 to begin with. We're also going to want to create an array price list to save all the prices and probability list to save all the probabilities. So going back down to scenario loop, we're going to want to make a variable probability input and make it equal to document.get element by ID, and it will be s prob input. And then we will also do price input equals document.get element by ID, and then this one is s price input. After that, we're going to want to calculate scenario probability, and that's going to be prob input dot value divided by 100. And then we're going to push that value onto the probability list. After that, we're going to make scenario price, and that's just going to be price input dot value. And then we're going to want to do price list dot push scenario price. After that, we're going to want to increase the scenario count, and we're going to want to set in price input equal to empty and prob input equal to empty as well. And we're actually going to do dot value for both of these. Finally, we're going to do document.get element by ID pop h1 dot text content is equal to scenario plus scenario count plus 1. There you go. So now let's check out what it looks like. So let's say we wanted 2 scenarios, and as you can see, it'll just run in an infinite loop. So one thing we need to add in our scenario loop is a check for if scenario count is equal to scenarios, then what we are going to want to do is see results, which will be a new function that I create. So I'm going to go ahead and create that function see results. And up here, I can call it. And then we'll hop into see results. So before we start working on see results, we're going to want to create a blank page for us to work on the results div within the HTML. So let's go back to styles, and just like we did earlier, temporarily make this visibility hidden. All right, so we can now work with a blank slate. So we have results div. So let's start building that out. h1 equals results h1, and for now we are going to leave that empty. And then we are going to have div class equals to container. So this will be a pie chart, and we're going to make that equal to container as well. Style is equal to width 300 pixels, height 300 pixels, and we're going to close that one out. Following that, we need another header, h2, id equals results h2. This will make more sense once we see the style of the results pop up. And finally, we have button type equals button, id equals restart button, on click will be equal to restart function, and we're going to leave a message click to restart, and that will be all for the button there. So let's save that. So you can see there is a button, and I will quickly make the function restart, just so we have that ready as well. So now we're going to want to style the results pop-up. So let's go dot results, position absolute, color, we're going to make black, width 600 pixels, height will be 600 pixels as well, background color light gray. We're going to want to make a border 5 pixels, solid yellow. And we're going to make a border radius of 20 pixels. Text align center, margin, we're going to make it 0 auto. Oops. Justify content center, top will be 27%. Margin left, 0. Margin right, auto. And I apologize, this will also be auto. Left will be 0, and right will also be 0. All right, so after making these changes, we can now see the results pop up in the middle here. So now what we're going to edit is the restart button. So restart button, open it up. Width will be 250 pixels. Padding will be 15.0. Text align center. Border radius of 25. Font weight bold. And we're going to have a border of 5, solid gold, and color black. All right, let's see what that looks like. And now we have a cool looking button. So one thing we will want to add is the hover. So we're going to go results, button, hover. And here we're just going to set background color to gold and cursor pointer just like we have previously. And now we can see that. So after completing the general design of the results pop-up, let's go back to the scenario. So we called see results. So within see results, we are going to want to start with variable probability equals find max, another function that we're going to have to call. So I'm going to go ahead and create that function, find max. Okay, and then within here, we're going to have to do a couple things. So first, we're going to need to find the payout for each scenario. So we're going to loop through price list, I++. So there gives us a for loop to loop through price list. Variable payout is equal to price list I divided by Bitcoin price minus 1. And then we're going to want to create another array, variable payouts. And then back down here, we're going to want to say payouts dot push payout. So continuing after the for loop, we're going to create a variable called optimal and set it equal to 0. And we're going to create a variable called opt I, make it equal to -1. After this, we're going to do another for loop, except for this time we're going to start at I equals 1. I is less than or equal to 100, and I++. So here is where we're going to calculate the optimal percentage to allocate your portfolio to Bitcoin. So the reason we did 100 was so we can say 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%. I know this doesn't go into decimals, but this is the level of accuracy that we're doing for this project. So the first thing I want to point out is that I received this formula from this math exchange. I'll leave the link in the description as well, but this is what we're using to find the optimal allocation. So the first thing we're going to do is say sum is equal to 0, and we're going to say for j equals 0, so a nested for loop, prob list dot length j++. So within here, we're going to say variable log is equal to math.log 1 plus parentheses payouts j times I divided by 100, 3 parentheses, and finish that line. Then we're going to add to the sum problist j times log. Okay, so after the for loop, it's going to go if sum is greater than optimal, then optimal will equal the new sum, and opt I will be equal to I. This will allow us to maintain which percentage is the optimal one. After it completes the first for loop, we will return opt I. So going back up to see results, we're going to say if that probability is less than 0, we can go ahead and set probability equal to 0. Okay, so variable purchase size will be equal to math.round probability divided by 100 times portfolio value, comma 2 to round to 2 decimal places. Next, we're going to do variable conic string is equal to conic gradient black 0.00% space plus probability plus percent, comma, yellow space plus probability plus percent parenthesis. I had to make sure I got that exactly right. Next, we're going to say document.getElementById popup.style.visibility will be hidden. Document.getElementById results h1 dot text content is equal to optimal allocation of Bitcoin, and then need to add probability plus percent. And if you remember, this was originally empty. Document.getElementById results h2 dot text content is equal to $ plus purchase size. Document.getElementId again results dot style dot visibility is equal to, as you guessed it, visible now. And then document.getElementById container style dot background is equal to conic string. All right, let's see results. So let's see what all these changes have done. So let's say our portfolio was $100, current price of Bitcoin right now is about 18,000. So let's go with 18. Let's test two scenarios. Let's say under one scenario it goes up to $35, probability of 40%, and the other scenario goes down to $10, probability of 60%, and it gives us an output of 26%. However, we're not seeing a pie chart, which is one of the goals for this web page. So we're going to need to add that. So after a little debugging, I did find that the height originally did not include the colon there, so just make sure to include that. So starting from the beginning, let's just test one scenario, and look at that. We have a beautiful pie chart that's in the middle, but let's get a scenario where we can actually see some percentages. So 100, let's go 18, 2. And let's test 35 at a 40% and 10 at a 60%. And it shows 26% of the pie, and that seems like a reasonable number for the numbers that we entered. So we're in a good place right now. Let's just add some space between the header and the input here. So to do that, let's just go BTC modal H1 and add some padding. And let's go 0, 10%, 20 pixels, 10%. So one more functionality I'd like to add is if there's like one scenario, it's going to autofill 100%. If there's two scenarios and the first one's 50, it's going to autofill 50. So to do that, let's create a function called remaining percent. And in here, we're just going to say variable prob sum is equal to 0. And then we're going to create a for loop for I is equal to 0, while I is less than prob list dot length I plus plus. Oops, plus plus. So we're going to iterate I, and all we're going to do here is say prob sum plus equals to prob list at I. And after that, let's just return 1 minus the prob sum times 100. So there's two places where we're going to want to utilize that remaining percent versus here. So let's go variable prob input, and we can actually just copy and paste this right here. And then we're going to make an if statement. If scenarios equals 1, then let's say prob input dot value is equal to math dot round that remaining percent to 1 decimal place. After that, let's say prob input read only is equal to true. And then down here, we're going to want to use it else if scenario count equals scenarios minus 1. Then we can copy and paste the same code. So to quickly test this, let's go 1, 1, 1, and as you can see, it auto-filled 1. So right now the website just looks a little bland with nothing on the sides happening. So I want to add a little decoration. So we're going to use that left side and right side div that we started with to add some decoration here. So let's start off with dot left side, and we're going to say position absolute, width of 10%, height of 100%, left at 0%, and animation, we're going to go change BG 10 seconds, linear infinite. And I'm actually going to copy and paste this and just change this to right for the right side. And then we're going to want to add an animation. So let's go keyframes, change BG. So here we're going to want to say 0% background color, and we're going to use RGB. So here is the first one. And there's about 10 different lines, so I'm just going to quickly copy all those in. So as you can see, we slowly progress the color to black and then back to yellow, going in 10% increments. So save that. And now you can see we have yellow and black animation on the sides. So now we want to build out the restart button that is at the end. So let's go document.getElementById, results, .style, .visibility is equal to hidden. Once again, document.getElementById, this time BTC model, .style, .visibility equals visible. And with the common trend, getElementById currency, .style, .display this time equals block. Document.getElementById button .style .visibility is equal to visible. And one more, document.getElementById sprob input .read only is equal to false. We're going to set all of our variables back to normal, so portfolio value, Bitcoin price, scenarios, scenario count, and all of our arrays. So let me just go up here. Price list, prob list, and payouts. And we're just going to make a few more changes. So input dot style dot border left is equal to none. Input dot style dot border radius is equal to 0, 7 pixels, 7 pixels, 0, input dot placeholder is equal to 1000, input dot style dot text align is equal to left, and input dot style dot max width is equal to 150 pixels. And finally, we can call start questions. One quick fix is we do not need to redeclare these as variables since they already have. So let's go ahead and delete all that. One last change that I would like to make is the pop h1 text. So instead of saying scenario count, we need to reset that to simply scenario 1. There we go, and save. Let's put this to the test. Let's say we have a $1,000 portfolio with the price of Bitcoin being around 19,000, and we want to test 4 scenarios. The first one is a moonshot at like 100,000. Let's give it a 10% chance of working out. The next one is a more realistic gain, 30,000. Let's give that a 40% chance of working out. The next one, it kind of stays around the same level. We give that one a 25%. And lastly, it goes down to 5,000. And we can see we get an optimal Bitcoin allocation of 49%. All right, well, the code will be in the description. Make sure you like this video if you got anything out of it, and subscribe if you want to see any more content just like this where I build websites from scratch. Thank you.